The small, remote village was the last place anyone would want to visit. Nestled deep in the wilderness, it was a place untouched by the fast-paced world. Time moved slowly here, and the thick trees and dark fog seemed to trap any visitors, making it feel like they were stepping back into an older, forgotten era. But within this quiet world, there was one place that the villagers dared not speak of. At the very edge of the village, hidden behind the thickest part of the forest, sat a dilapidated house. Once a grand estate, it had long been abandoned. Its windows were covered in grime, its roof sagged with years of neglect. Locals avoided it, crossing to the other side of the village whenever they passed. Whispers of something terrible, something unspeakable, had been tied to the house for as long as anyone could remember. Some said it was cursed. Others swore it was haunted. But no one ever dared to go inside to find out. And anyone who did, never came back the same. Yet, on one particularly restless evening, a visitor came into town. A curious, young traveler named Aaron, eager to uncover the secrets of forgotten places, stumbled upon the village. His eyes sparkled with the excitement of adventure as he spoke to the locals, asking about the old house. The villagers warned him, their faces pale, urging him to stay away. But Aaron was undeterred. "I've been to worse places," he laughed. "There's no such thing as ghosts." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, but said no more. They knew, as everyone did, that the house held a terrible reputation. But Aaron's curiosity was a force too powerful to ignore. With a sense of reckless abandon, he decided that he would spend the night in the house, to prove that it was nothing but an old, abandoned relic. That night, he would uncover the truth once and for all. Aaron ventured into the woods alone, the fading daylight struggling to break through the thick canopy above. The house loomed in the distance, its silhouette a dark shape against the dimming sky. The air grew colder as he approached, and the sound of his footsteps echoed unnervingly through the trees. The front door creaked as he pushed it open, the smell of damp wood and decay filling his nostrils. The walls inside were covered in mildew, the once grand furniture now nothing more than rotting skeletons of their former selves. The house felt heavy, oppressive, as if the air itself was thick with the memories of those who had once lived there. But despite the creeping unease in his chest, Aaron laughed it off, shaking his head at how easily spooked the villagers had been. He set up his things in the living room, determined to stay the night. As darkness fell, he lit a candle and sat on the floor, his flashlight scanning the room. Everything was still, far too still. It was then that he heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. At first, he thought it was just the wind. But no, the noise came again, this time louder, a soft creak from the upstairs hallway, as though someone, or something, was walking. Aaron froze, the hairs on his neck standing on end. He quickly turned off the flashlight, the room now illuminated only by the flickering candlelight. He waited, his heart pounding. The sound continued, a slow, deliberate creak of footsteps dragging across the old wooden floorboards. A chill crawled down his spine as he stood up, gripping the candle tightly in his hand. He turned toward the stairs leading up to the second floor. The air seemed to grow colder, and he could see his breath in the dim light. "Probably just the house settling," he muttered, trying to reassure himself. But deep down, a nagging feeling told him something was wrong. As he moved toward the staircase, the noises grew louder, more distinct. But then they stopped, abruptly. Everything went silent. It was as if the house had held its breath. Aaron's pulse raced as his mind raced to make sense of it. Should he go up? Should he leave? But before he could make a decision, something shifted in the corner of his vision, a fleeting shadow darted past the doorway at the top of the stairs. He turned quickly, but there was nothing there. For a moment, he thought he saw something, just a flicker in the dark. But it was gone before he could focus on it. The silence returned, heavy and oppressive. The only sound now was his own breathing. Aaron took a slow step toward the stairs, his body tense with uncertainty. He wasn't sure what he was expecting to find, but the sudden desire to know, to uncover the truth, surged within him. With a deep breath, he ascended the stairs, the creaks underfoot seeming to grow louder with each step. The air grew colder as he reached the top, and he could hear the faintest of whispers, barely audible, like distant voices calling his name. At the end of the hallway, the door to a room stood slightly ajar. He couldn't see inside, but a faint light seemed to glow from within. Curiosity gripped him, and despite the growing sense of dread, he pushed the door open. The room was empty, save for an old, dusty chair facing the corner. The walls were covered in strange symbols, drawn hastily in what appeared to be blood. Aaron's heart raced, his breath quickened. He took a step back, feeling an overwhelming sense of being watched, as though something unseen was lurking just behind him. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. The room was plunged into darkness, and the temperature dropped even further. It was then that the whispering began, low, soft, like 1,000 voices murmuring secrets in the dark. The door slammed shut with a force that shook the very foundations of the house. Aaron's heart pounded in his chest as he fumbled in the dark, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The air around him grew suffocating, as though the walls were closing in. The faint whispering, growing louder now, felt as if it was coming from all directions, seeping into his mind. "Hello," he called out, his voice trembling. It sounded weak, too weak for the vast emptiness around him. But there was no reply, only more whispers, growing clearer, more distinct. The words were foreign, unintelligible, and yet, they sounded like they were calling his name. A sudden scratch against the door broke his concentration, a sound like fingernails dragging across wood. His skin crawled. The candle flickered violently, casting strange shadows that danced and stretched across the walls. He tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how hard he pushed, it remained firmly shut, as though something on the other side was holding it closed. The room seemed to grow darker, colder, and the shadows began to move of their own accord. His hands began to shake as he reached for his flashlight, but before he could turn it on, the whispering stopped. A dead silence followed, thick and suffocating. A strange pressure settled on Aaron's chest, as if the very air around him had changed, become heavier, more oppressive. It felt as though invisible hands were gripping him, tightening their hold with every passing second. And then, through the corner of his eye, he saw it, a fleeting movement in the shadows. It was fast, too fast to focus on, but it felt wrong. His pulse quickened as the shadows seemed to pulse with life. He turned his head slowly, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The air in the room shimmered faintly, like heat rising from the ground, but it wasn't heat, something darker, something sinister. Tap. 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 A sound echoed from behind him, slow, deliberate steps coming from the far corner of the room. He spun around, but there was nothing there. Only darkness. His hand shook as he turned the flashlight on, the beam cutting through the blackness in sharp streaks. But the light revealed nothing. No shadow, no figure, just the dimly lit, dust-choked room that felt like it was closing in on him. The markings. His breath caught as he noticed something he hadn't before, strange symbols etched deep into the walls, just above eye level. They were jagged, sharp, and written in what appeared to be some kind of red substance. It was almost too dark to tell, but the crimson marks gleamed in the dim light, like fresh blood. Aaron stepped closer, squinting at the symbols. His fingers grazed the surface of the wall, and a chill shot up his spine. The marks were not just drawn on the surface, they seemed to have been carved into the very structure of the house. As his finger traced the symbols, a low growl rumbled beneath the floorboards. The sound was like something waking from a deep slumber. He jerked his hand back, but the growl continued, closer now, almost directly beneath him. Panic rose in his throat. Without thinking, Aaron turned toward the door again, desperate to escape. But just as he did, the shadows moved. They slithered across the walls, creeping toward him with terrifying speed. He froze, paralyzed, as the shadows seemed to take shape, like figures, vaguely human, their forms distorted and blurred by the flickering light. A cold gust of air swept through the room, and the temperature dropped dramatically. Aaron's breath came out in visible clouds, but it wasn't just the cold that made him shiver. No, it was the sudden, sharp feeling of something touching him. He felt the icy sensation crawl along his arm, like fingers trailing across his skin, but when he looked, there was nothing there. The pressure on his chest grew tighter, and he could feel something breathing behind him, warm and slow, almost like it was savoring his fear. Spinning around in panic, Aaron found himself face to face with a shadow, its form now unmistakable. It was tall, too tall, its body twisted and malformed, as if it had once been human but had long since lost any trace of humanity. Its eyes were hollow, dark voids that seemed to pull him in. The thing let out a sound, a low, guttural hiss that vibrated through his entire body. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth, but no sound escaped, only the sickening feeling that it was feeding off his terror. With everything inside him screaming to run, Aaron pushed against the shadows, trying to break free. His flashlight slipped from his hand and fell to the floor, its light flickering wildly before it went out completely. He bolted toward the door, using all his strength to shove it open. The moment the door creaked open, the shadows seemed to retreat, as if giving way to his desperate escape. Breathless and trembling, Aaron stumbled out of the room, his heart hammering in his chest. But as he stepped into the hallway, he realized something terrifying: the house wasn't empty anymore. The figures, the shadows, were everywhere, crowding the hall, moving toward him with an unnatural, jerking pace. He ran, his feet slipping on the dusty floors as he made his way toward the stairs. The whispers began again, louder now, as if 1,000 voices were chanting his name. He turned, but the house had changed. The hallway stretched endlessly, the door he had entered from nowhere in sight. With panic surging through his veins, Aaron finally found the front door. The cold night air hit him like a wave as he broke through the threshold and into the woods. But even as he ran, his mind raced with one terrible thought. Whatever was in that house, it was following him. Aaron didn't stop running. His lungs burned, and his legs felt as if they might collapse beneath him, but he didn't care. His only thought was escape, the woods, the village, anything that could put distance between him and the house. The moon, now high in the sky, cast a cold light on the forest floor, but the shadows between the trees seemed deeper than before. No longer just trees and branches, they were forms, figures, moving just beyond his sight. Every step he took felt heavier, as though the very ground beneath him was trying to pull him back, to draw him into the same darkness he had just fled. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he stumbled into the village. His heart pounded in his ears, his breath ragged, and his skin felt cold with fear. The once quiet town now seemed even eerier under the pale moonlight, the windows of the houses dark and empty. It was as if the entire village had fallen silent, holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He made his way to the local inn, the only place still open. The innkeeper, a gray-haired woman with wary eyes, glanced up at him as he entered, his clothes soaked with sweat, his face pale and drawn. "Did you go to the house?" she asked, her voice a low whisper, as though speaking louder would summon something. Aaron nodded, his words failing him at first. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The terror of what he had seen still gripped him like a vice. "You should not have gone," she murmured, shaking her head. "The house, it's not just a building. It's a doorway." The woman led Aaron to a small corner of the inn, where an old wooden table was covered in maps and dusty books. She sat him down, pouring him a cup of water. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke. "Many years ago," she began, "the house was built by a man named James Harrow. He was a wealthy landowner, but he was obsessed with the occult. He wanted to uncover the secrets of life after death, and he believed the house could be a conduit to the other side. But something went terribly wrong. People who lived there disappeared. No one ever saw them again." She paused, glancing nervously toward the window as though the house itself might be listening. "There are stories, whispers, that the house doesn't just trap people, it feeds on them. The house has been growing for years, twisting itself with each life it takes. It uses the energy of fear, of despair, to feed and become stronger." Aaron felt a chill run down his spine, a deep understanding creeping into his thoughts. The shadows, the whispers, the pressure he had felt, it wasn't just the house that had been alive. It was something far worse. "You can't leave," the innkeeper continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Once the house claims you, it never lets go. It follows you. It finds a way back. And once you've been touched by it, the door is always open. Aaron shook his head in disbelief. He couldn't fathom it. He had left the house, he had escaped. But as the woman spoke, he began to remember things, small, insignificant details he had pushed aside in the rush of adrenaline. The figure in the corner of his vision. The cold touch that had trailed his arm. The shadows that hadn't just moved, they had followed him. They were still following him. He stood up suddenly, panic rising again. No. I have to go. I can't stay here. But as he turned to leave, he froze. The door to the inn was cracked open, just a little. And from the crack, through the silence, he heard it, faint, distant, but unmistakable. The whispers. Not from the house. From behind him. The innkeeper turned pale, her hands trembling as she reached out to him. It's too late. The house is never far behind. It doesn't just haunt the living. It haunts the mind. It becomes part of you. Aaron's head swam as the whispers grew louder, clearer. They were inside his head now, murmuring, urging him to return. To return to the house. No, he said, more to himself than to anyone else. But as he looked toward the window, the darkness outside began to shift, as though something was moving through the night itself. The shape of the house loomed on the horizon, its windows glowing faintly in the dark, as though it were waiting. Watching. It wasn't just a place. It was a presence. Aaron turned back to the innkeeper, his face drained of all color. What can I do? How do I stop it? The woman lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. There's no stopping it. There's only one way to end it. She hesitated before continuing, as if weighing the cost of her words. You must return to the house. Confront what's inside. Face the thing that watches from the shadows. Only then can you close the door. Aaron's chest tightened as he realized the truth of her words. There was no escaping it. No running from it. The house would always find him. Always haunt him. With trembling hands, he turned away from the woman and walked out of the inn. His heart thudded in his chest as his feet moved toward the woods once more. His mind screamed at him to stop, but the pull of the house was too strong. It was calling him back. As Aaron entered the woods, the whispers grew louder, merging into a chorus that filled his head. The path to the house seemed to stretch impossibly long, the trees growing thicker, their limbs like outstretched arms reaching for him. When he reached the house, the door stood ajar. The shadows inside beckoned him, the air thick with the weight of what lay beyond. His pulse raced, but his legs moved forward, carrying him into the darkness. The moment he stepped inside, everything went black. Aaron's breath caught in his throat as the darkness consumed him. His body moved on its own, as though the house had taken control of his every step. His heart hammered in his chest, his hands clammy with cold sweat. Every part of him screamed to run, to escape, but there was no escape now. The door had closed behind him. The house had claimed him. He tried to call out, but his voice was lost in the suffocating blackness. His eyes strained to see, but the shadows were thick and unyielding. The air around him was cold, unnaturally cold, and the silence pressed in on him like a weight. But then, just as he thought he might lose himself to the darkness, a low, hollow voice echoed from the depths of the house. Aaron. The voice was a whisper, yet it felt like it was reverberating inside his skull, vibrating through his very bones. It was familiar, yet completely foreign. He froze, dread pooling in his stomach. The voice repeated his name, this time with a tone of unbearable sorrow. It was as if the house itself were calling to him, trying to pull him deeper into its suffocating embrace. Suddenly, the shadows around him began to shift. The air grew heavier, as if something ancient and malevolent were stirring deep within the house. The very walls seemed to pulse with life. The floor beneath his feet creaked and groaned, like the house itself was waking up from a long slumber. And then, the whispers returned, thousands of voices, all speaking at once, murmuring, chanting, crying, all of them tangled together in an agonizing cacophony. The sound was maddening, disorienting, pulling Aaron in every direction at once. His mind reeled with the impossible realization that there was something in the house far older, far more powerful than he could ever have imagined. His eyes darted frantically in the dark, but he couldn't see a thing. Yet, the more he listened, the more he could feel it, the presence, watching, waiting. It wasn't the house alone. There were others here, trapped, just as he had been. His hands shook as he reached out, searching for something to steady himself, and that's when he felt it, a cold, clammy hand brush against his own. The faces in the shadows. Before he could react, the shadows seemed to part, and for the first time since entering the house, Aaron saw a glimpse of the room around him. It was as if a faint light flickered to life in the far corner, revealing the figures, people, that stood just out of reach. Their faces were pale and contorted in agony, their eyes hollow and lifeless. They were moving, slowly, as if their limbs no longer obeyed them. Some reached out toward him, their fingers twitching, but there was no sound, no plea for help, no scream. Only the echo of their presence. He recognized some of them, or rather, the twisted remnants of who they once were. A woman with dark hair, her face frozen in terror, a man whose eyes were wide with a haunting, silent scream. And among them was a figure he couldn't place, tall, thin, dressed in dark clothing, its features hidden in the shadows. Each one of them, just like him, was trapped in this nightmare, their souls bound to the house. Aaron's breath quickened as the figure in the shadows stepped forward, revealing a face, no, not a face, but a mask of darkness. The figure was tall, with a presence so overwhelming that Aaron could hardly stand in its presence. It was alive, but not in the way a human was. It was something older, something darker, and it seemed to know Aaron in a way that made his skin crawl. "You should not have come," the figure spoke, its voice like 1,000 whispers, all intertwined into a single, monstrous utterance. "You belong to the house now. All who enter, belong to me." Aaron stumbled backward, his eyes wide with fear. He tried to run, to flee, but the figure's hand shot out, catching him by the wrist with a grip that felt like ice. The room seemed to warp around him as the shadows tightened, pulling him toward the center of the house, where the walls seemed to bend and twist in on themselves. "Every soul that steps through these doors is claimed," the figure continued, its voice chilling and hollow. "And once you are here, there is no leaving. The choice." Aaron's mind raced as he struggled against the figure's grip. This was it. This was the moment he had feared. The house was alive. It fed on fear, on despair, and it had consumed everyone who had entered, leaving only their tortured souls behind. But then, through the haze of fear and confusion, something inside Aaron clicked. He remembered the old innkeeper's words, the house was not just a place. It was a doorway. It wasn't just about confronting the house, it was about confronting whatever it had become. It needed to be stopped, or it would claim more souls, including his. With one final surge of defiance, Aaron pulled against the cold, unyielding grip. "I won't let you take me," he shouted, his voice shaking but filled with a newfound strength. He knew it was crazy, that there was no way he could fight this thing. But he also knew that if he didn't try, there would be no end to the suffering. The figure hissed, tightening its grip, but Aaron kept pushing, his mind focused on the only thing that mattered now, the door. He needed to find it. The house couldn't survive without the door. The door was the source of its power. The shadows around him thickened, but Aaron could see it now, a faint outline, glowing through the dark. A doorway, like the one he had passed through earlier. He rushed toward it, ignoring the pain in his limbs, the crushing weight of the shadows trying to pull him down. Just as he reached the door, the figure screamed, a terrible, otherworldly screech that shook the very foundation of the house. But it was too late. Aaron pushed through the doorway with everything he had, and as he did, the house screamed, a deafening, agonizing howl that reverberated through his bones. The door slammed shut behind him. The aftermath. Aaron stumbled into the cold night air, gasping for breath. The woods around him were silent once again. The house was gone. The darkness had lifted. But Aaron knew that he hadn't truly escaped. Not completely. The house was gone, yes, but it was never truly gone. The door had been closed, but it was always waiting, always watching. And one day, someone else would stumble into the house. Someone else would hear the whispers. Someone else would be pulled into its terrible grip. But for now, Aaron was free. And he knew, with a sickening certainty, that the door would never truly be closed for good.